On our 5th wedding anniversary, my husband and I were camping on the mountain. He received a call from his first love and hurriedly descended the mountain, without even saying a word to me, and drove away. In the middle of the night, the weather changed abruptly, with a sudden snowfall. Suffering from an allergic asthma attack, I called him countless times, but he didn't answer any of them. I nearly died on the mountain. After being discharged from the hospital, I finally saw my husband who had been missing for many days. However, he opened his mouth to discuss divorce with me. He said, "Can we divorce for a period of time first? Ivy has been diagnosed with cancer and has less than a year left. I want to accompany her through the last phase of her life, and after she passes away, I will remarry you." For this, he was willing to mortgage all his assets to me. Seeing the restrained deep affection on their faces, I readily signed the divorce agreement. I discovered that my husband Ethan had disappeared 20 minutes ago. The howling wind outside the tent made my heart pound with fear. Stepping out of the tent, I found that the originally star-filled night sky was now pitch black, as if the weather was about to change. Before setting off, I had checked the weather forecast, and it was clearly good weather for these 2 days. However, seeing the tree trunks bent by the wind and the sudden drop in temperature, an uneasy premonition arose in my heart. I wanted to call Ethan to descend the mountain quickly. But after searching for a long time, I realized he was gone, and his phone couldn't be reached at all. In this remote wilderness, could something have happened to him? Before I could expand the search area further, the sudden drop in temperature caused strong cold air to irritate my airways, making my throat feel dry and itchy, and my breathing somewhat rapid. My intuition told me that it was an allergic asthma attack. I was glad that I had carried medication with me. But as I rummaged through the tent looking for the asthma inhaler, I discovered that the backpack containing the medicine had disappeared along with Ethan. Panic surged within me. I quickly dialed the rescue hotline and explained my situation. During the wait for rescue, I called Ethan dozens of times, but he still didn't answer any. Outside the tent, many starlights were dotted, very conspicuous in the pitch-black night sky. The medical rescue team from the foot of the mountain first used a drone to deliver the asthma inhaler to me. Later, after the rescue team came up, they carried me down the mountain and sent me to the hospital. It wasn't until dawn that Ethan's phone was finally answered. A gentle female voice came from the receiver. "Hello, how are you?" I was a bit dazed, feeling that the voice was incredibly familiar. But because I was too anxious, I couldn't think much and hurriedly asked, "I'm looking for Ethan, is he there?" The woman on the other end lowered her voice and whispered, "He was too tired last night and is still sleeping now. It's inconvenient for him to take the call at the moment. Do you have something? I can relay it to him later." "Who are you?" I asked, somewhat puzzled. "Ivy." "Ivy? Ethan's ex-girlfriend, didn't she go abroad in her junior year? And how could they be together?" My mind went blank. I couldn't understand how my husband, who was camping with me on the mountain last night, ended up at Ivy's place after disappearing in the middle of the night. And Ivy said he was too tired last night and still sleeping. My throat suddenly felt dry and parched, unable to utter a word. Seeing that I hadn't spoken for a while, she continued, "Then, when Ethan wakes up, I'll have him call you back?" I finally squeezed out a hoarse voice, "No need, when did he go to your place?" She paused, seemingly recalling. After a moment, she replied, "Around 2 in the morning, I think. I wasn't feeling well and called him, so he rushed over." Her tone was calm and indifferent, as if answering an unrelated person's question. I didn't believe she didn't know who I was. At least in my memory, Ethan's phone had me noted as wife dear. But, it didn't matter anymore. From the moment Ivy answered Ethan's phone, our marriage was doomed to have no possibility of continuing. Lying on the hospital bed, I stared blankly at the ceiling. I couldn't figure out why a perfectly good wedding anniversary had suddenly turned into this. I had always prided myself on having a happy and loving marriage with Ethan. Although I knew he had once had a passionate romance, and that his girlfriend at the time was our university's campus belle, Ivy. But who doesn't have a past? There was no need for me to dwell on them since they had already broken up, Moreover, Ethan and I got together 3 years after Ivy went abroad. Even if it were mourning, the 3-year period should have been over. Now it seems I had blindly trusted our marriage. Due to the high fever, the doctor feared that the asthma might cause a lung infection, so I was observed in the hospital for 3 days. I asked a lawyer friend to draft a divorce agreement for me. Since Ethan wanted to go back to his first love, I had no reason not to fulfill his wish. 3 days later, I was discharged and went home. When I returned to the villa and tried to unlock downstairs, the fingerprint verification failed repeatedly. I tried the password, and it was also wrong. I frowned and rang the doorbell. It was Ethan who came to open the door. Upon seeing me, anger immediately appeared on his face. "You still know to come back? You haven't returned home these days, where exactly have you been?" He had the nerve to question me. "What do you think?" I sneered coldly. Ethan hesitated, seemingly recalling the sudden snowfall on the night we camped. He threw out a series of questions. "You descended the mountain in time after it snowed that day, right? After descending the mountain, you should have contacted me promptly. Why didn't you report that you were safe for so many days? Don't you know I was worried about you? Also, where exactly have you been these days you disappeared? It said online that the camping circle is chaotic. Did you, these days with other people?" I was so angered by his words that my limbs went numb, and my brain felt dizzy. Looking at my husband of 5 years in front of me, I raised my hand and slapped him hard across the face. "You beast! Get out!" This slap used all my strength, and after hitting him, I felt completely drained. I pushed Ethan aside and staggered into the house. As soon as I opened the door, the scene before me stunned me in place. Ivy was lazily sitting on the sofa wearing my newly bought home clothes, holding a fork and eating fruit. Ethan had actually brought her home. My brain felt dizzy again. The girl stared at the TV. "Ethan, I want to drink hot cocoa, can you make me a cup?" Seeing no response, she turned her head toward the door. Our eyes met. Ivy's hand eating fruit paused, then she composed her expression and stood up. Her face was full of embarrassment. "So Claire is back, come in quickly, it's cold outside." I ignored her, only trying hard to control my trembling body. Ivy seemed not to notice my abnormality and started talking on her own. "Claire, you're so unfair. When did you and Ethan get married? You didn't even notify me to come drink your wedding toast." I was really shocked when Ethan mentioned it a couple of days ago. "I really didn't expect you two to end up together. After all, there were so many women around Ethan back then." I found it amusing. In university, she and I only worked together in a club, merely acquaintances at best. How could I invite her to my wedding? Ethan spoke up to explain. "Claire and I had a simple wedding, only inviting close family and friends, no one else. Besides, you were abroad at that time, it wouldn't be right to ask you to travel tens of thousands of kilometers to attend our wedding." The woman neither agreed nor disagreed, suddenly exclaiming, "Ethan, what's wrong with your face? Couldn't it be that Claire hit you?" Then she said to me, "Claire, you're too overbearing. You've been out playing and not coming home these 2 days, Ethan has been thinking about you all the time, how can you hit him as soon as you come back?" When camping was mentioned, Ethan's face darkened further. I looked at Ivy and asked with a smile, "Ivy, are you planning to rekindle old flames with Ethan?" Ivy was stunned. Then, as if her lie had been exposed, she shook her head in panic. "No, you're married, how could I want to destroy your marriage?" However, her answer lacked confidence. I continued, "Since you don't want to destroy our marriage, who are you performing this green tea act for now?" "Who's being green tea?" Ivy's face instantly turned red. "It was Ethan who said I wasn't feeling well and insisted I stay at your house, otherwise do you think I care to come?" I sneered, "Is that so? I see you two are having quite a good time." "You." Ivy's eyes turned red with anger, and she furiously threw the fruit fork in her hand to the ground. Ethan frowned deeply and spoke in a low voice, "Ivy and I have nothing, there's no need for you to say such harsh words." I raised an eyebrow. "What? You can do it, but I can't say it? You find my words unpleasant?" I haven't even complained about how ugly your actions are. Ivy looked aggrieved. Claire, don't go too far. I scoffed. I'm going too far? You come into my house, sit on the sofa I bought, wear my clothes, and say I'm going too far? Are you okay? Say less. Ethan tugged at my hem from behind. But Ivy had already covered her face, crying, and ran to the bathroom, then slammed the door shut with a bang. I kicked off my shoes and walked straight inside barefoot. Ethan followed closely behind me. I suddenly turned around sharply. He couldn't stop in time and stumbled, almost falling to the ground. I crossed my arms and sneered, "Mr. Ethan, are you planning to enjoy both wife and concubine? Letting the original wife and the mistress live under the same roof?" Ethan stepped back, hastily avoiding my mocking gaze. "What nonsense are you talking? Ivy has stomach cancer, her husband divorced her, she has no relatives in the country, so I brought her back to take care of her. I originally planned to discuss it with you before bringing her over, who knew you wouldn't come home for several days in a row." I was stunned. Ivy has stomach cancer? I took out the discharge certificate from my bag and threw it at his face. "Why didn't I come home?" "It's because you sneaked down the mountain in the middle of the night and left me there. You took away my spare asthma inhaler. I had an asthma attack and almost died on the mountain, and you ask why I didn't come home?" By the end, I was already roaring. Ethan held the hospital's diagnosis certificate, his hands gradually starting to tremble. Thinking about how I almost lost my life on the mountain due to an allergic asthma attack. Recalling how, even under breathing difficulties, I was still worried about him. Intense hatred surged in my heart. I raised my hand and slapped him hard across the face again. This time he didn't dodge. 5 finger marks appeared instantly. He touched the cheek I had hit with his tongue, his expression pained. "I'm sorry, Ivy had a sudden gastric hemorrhage at that time, she had just returned to the country and didn't know who to contact for a moment. I was too anxious, I didn't notice that I casually took the backpack down the mountain when descending. By the time I realized, I was already at the foot of the mountain, so." I raised my hand again and gave him another slap. He could have woken me up, told me, and called me to descend the mountain together. Instead of sneakily taking the backpack, driving away the car, and leaving me alone on the mountaintop. Ivy rushed out of the bathroom upon hearing the sound. She blocked in front of Ethan, assuming a protective stance. "Claire, if you want to blame someone, blame me. It was I who called Ethan. I didn't expect you to suddenly have an asthma attack, but all said and done, didn't you come back safely?" I was speechless and laughed. "In law, isn't attempted murder still called murder?" I roared at her, "Get out." Ethan's brows furrowed, he protected Ivy behind him. "Claire, it was me who descended without telling you, it was me who left you on the mountain, everything is my fault, you can hit or scold me, but please don't hurt Ivy, she's innocent." I took a deep breath, trying to alleviate the grief and indignation in my heart. But my hands were still trembling with anger. Ivy's small face was pale, full of a sense of brokenness. "Ethan, maybe I should go stay in a hotel, I don't want you two as a couple to argue because of me." After saying that, she apologized to me. "I'm sorry Claire, but Ethan and I really have nothing, I hope you don't misunderstand him." What a fine cup of tea. With a smile on my lips, I coldly watched her tea art performance. Ethan's gaze swept toward me, his voice as cold as frost. "This villa is half owned by us as a couple, I won't let Ivy leave." He said it as if notifying me. Ivy's beautiful eyes brightened. But she still pretended to decline. "No need, Claire doesn't welcome me, I don't want you to because of me." Ethan interrupted her, "She and I won't have any problems, just stay with peace of mind. What if you suddenly vomit blood in the middle of the night like a few days ago? Do you expect the hotel staff to send you to the hospital?" Ivy lowered her head somewhat guiltily. "I'm sorry, I've implicated you." The two of them sang in harmony, treating me like air. I pinched my tiger's mouth to keep my dizzy mind clear. Ethan spoke to Ivy. "Ivy, you go to the room first, I have some words to say to Claire." The woman hesitated, wanting to speak but stopping. She tightly grasped Ethan's hem. "Don't argue because of me, I can move out anytime." Don't worry, she and I won't argue, be good, go back to the room first. Ethan patiently comforted her. I closed my eyes weakly. Waves of nausea surged in my heart. Ivy went to the upstairs bedroom, looking back every 3 steps. Hearing the door close upstairs, Ethan spoke to me. Claire, I want to discuss something with you. I clenched my teeth and said nothing. Ethan continued, can we handle a divorce for a period of time? Probably fearing my refusal, he quickly explained, Ivy's condition is quite serious, she may have less than a year left, that's why I brought her home to take care of her. I looked at him coldly, waiting for him to finish. You know, I had a relationship with her in university. At that time I promised to take her to do many things, but because we were still studying and financially tight, most of them couldn't be realized. Now her life is coming to an end, she returned to the country to fulfill her last wishes. I want to accompany her to complete those past promises. Ethan stammered to finish. Then there was silence. A long silence. I almost thought there was something wrong with my ears. I never thought in my lifetime I would hear such an absurd and outrageous reason for divorce. Seeing that I hadn't responded, Ethan said anxiously, don't worry, I'm just helping Ivy fulfill all her wishes, accompanying her like family. After she passes, I'll handle her affairs and come back to remarry you. Facts prove that under extreme speechlessness and anger, one would laugh instead. Am I some cheap person? Needing to cooperate with him in his deep affection for his ex-girlfriend, and then wait eagerly in place for him to return. I disagree. I said firmly. Although I had already drafted the divorce agreement, seeing the anxious expression on the man in front of me, I suddenly changed my mind. Ethan choked. At that moment, a woman's voice came from upstairs. Ethan, don't mess around, I won't agree to the proposal you made with me before. She leaned on the second-floor railing and shouted, Claire, don't listen to Ethan's nonsense, he's just worried about my health, but I don't want to intervene in your marriage, I'll move out tomorrow. I sneered. Don't want to intervene, but hasn't she already intervened? Downstairs, neither Ethan nor I responded. But Ethan seemed to have made up his mind, and when he spoke again, his tone carried some coldness and distance. Claire, our divorce is only temporary, no longer than 2 years at most. As compensation I can gift you 10% of the company's shares. My voice was colder than his, and word by word, I said, I disagree. A mere 10% of the shares. But that's my husband, my beloved spouse of 3 years of marriage. Such feelings, need more money. I packed some clothes and daily necessities, pushing the suitcase to leave. Ethan blocked me angrily at the door, roaring at me, where are you going again? You just came back and want to go out, who exactly is out there? I said, we're just temporarily divorcing, Ivy doesn't have much time left, can't we help her fulfill her last wishes? I scoffed lightly, all her wishes must be fulfilled? If she wants to go to the moon, would you send her up too? Ethan rubbed his hair irritably. The point is her wishes are just for me to fulfill the promises I made to her back then, this is what I owe her. I mocked. I didn't know you were such a promise-keeping person, since you owe her, why did you break up in the first place? He paced back and forth, Claire, I've always thought you were a reasonable person, I didn't expect you to be so cold-blooded and heartless, what do you have to haggle over with a dying person? For Ivy, he hurled one thunderbolt after another at me. I looked at him coldly as his emotions grew increasingly anxious. I don't care about your past, anyway I won't agree to divorce, if you want to divorce, go to court and sue me. After thinking, I added fuel to the fire, right, I won't admit that the marital relationship has broken down, and I'm the innocent party, you want to divorce me, it's not that easy, the lawsuit will take at least a year or so. Ethan's mouth opened. Then he pleaded, we're just temporarily divorcing, after fulfilling Ivy's wishes, we'll restore our marital relationship. If you're worried about any changes, besides gifting you 10% of the shares, I can give you all the marital property. Although I got the answer I wanted, my heart still inevitably ached. I smiled bitterly. I had to admit, he really loved her. Fine. We'll divorce. The man in front of me finally breathed a sigh of relief. I pushed the suitcase out the door. This time, Ethan didn't stop me again. The cold wind poured in from the collar, freezing me to shiver. My heart ached in spasms. Walking outside, I covered my chest and slowly squatted down, my stomach churning violently. I couldn't help but dry heave. It was too ridiculous. 5 years of marriage ended hastily in this way. Laughing and laughing, tears flowed uncontrollably. 5 years of feelings, ultimately fed to the dogs. I pushed the luggage back to my grandparents' old house. Since the 2 elders passed away, I rarely returned here. Afraid of being reminded of them by things. Only regularly hiring housekeeping to clean. The furnishings here were the same as when grandparents were alive, almost unchanged. I fetched a basin of water and started wiping the dust in the house. Until the sun set in the west, I slumped on the sofa. I stared at the portraits of grandparents and parents in a daze. In this world, it's really just me left alone. My parents died in an accident when the factory building collapsed when I was 3 years old. It was grandparents who raised me. That night, I curled up on the sofa and slept deeply. When I woke up, my mind was still somewhat muddled. I sat on the sofa for a long time before realizing this was my own home. I put on slippers and simply washed up. I was standing on the balcony staring blankly at the morning exercise crowd. The doorbell rang. I lazily opened the door. It was Ethan, holding 2 documents in his hand. Hee. So eager to bring the divorce agreement, afraid I'll regret it? I still sighed lightly in my heart. Ethan handed me the breakfast in his other hand. It was pan-fried buns and soy milk. I guessed you must have returned to Grandpa's house. I brought you breakfast on the way, eat some. I took the breakfast expressionlessly, and with one hand pulled out the divorce agreement from his hand. Did you bring a pen? Ethan felt his pocket, took out a black pen from his coat and handed it to me. Claire, thank you for understanding. Don't worry, after I handle Ivy's side, I will compensate you well. Compensate me? With what to compensate me? Guilt finally appeared on his face. While eating the pan-fried buns, I flipped through the property division section. The property division was clear. All marital property went to me, including the house, car, and stocks. He hadn't tampered with anything. I picked up the pen on the table and neatly signed my name. In duplicate, I kept 1 copy for myself. Then after I finish breakfast, let's go to the Civil Affairs Bureau to handle it. I ate very quickly, even wolfing it down. Mainly because now, I was afraid he would regret it. Ethan drove me to the Civil Affairs Bureau. Along the way, neither of us spoke again. When handling the divorce registration, the staff asked, "Have both of you carefully considered and voluntarily decided to divorce?" Ethan and I both nodded. The staff briefly flipped through the divorce agreement, then gave Ethan a meaningful look. Probably rarely encountered a husband who would give all property to his ex-wife like this. This is the acceptance receipt. Please come to collect the divorce certificate within the specified time, otherwise if expired, you need to reappoint for registration. Ethan took the acceptance receipt and let out a soft breath. He and I walked out of the Civil Affairs Bureau one after the other. Ethan. I called him from behind. What's wrong? I asked the question lingering in my heart, why must we divorce? Couldn't you secretly support her and take care of her behind my back? If lucky, in 2 years I might not discover at all. Ethan slowly turned around, his gaze deep and firm. I won't let her bear moral condemnation, nor allow others to gossip about her. She has never been anyone's third party. Divorcing you is merely to take care of her as a friend. I have no intention of anything happening with her, you can rest assured. Oh, so that's how it is. I think what he said makes sense. Then I can take his property with a clear conscience. Between feelings and money, I have to get one at least. A month later, Ethan and I successfully obtained the divorce certificate. The house, car, funds, stocks all transferred to my name. I originally held 35% of the company's shares, plus the 10% he gifted me. Now my shareholding is almost on par with his. This company was founded 6 years ago with me accompanying him. Recalling the initial stage, it was simply a long battle with numerous difficulties. Our startup capital was scarce, every decision was like walking a tightrope. Purchasing office equipment, leasing venues, technology research and development, market expansion, everything required careful calculation. That feeling of being cash-strapped is still etched in my memory. However, he and I planted the tree, but who would enjoy the shade later is unknown. I looked at the equity transfer document in my hand. I began to entrust an intermediary to help me split the shares into scattered shares and sell them off. Ethan's mind is now entirely on Ivy. I don't believe he will manage this company well. Moreover, I really don't want any entanglement with him anymore. Converting shares to money, I won't lose out. The day after the new property certificate was issued, I listed the villa with a real estate agent. Because this house has an excellent location and is in the school district of experimental primary and middle schools, buyers came soon. Originally I was reluctant to sell, but thinking that Ethan and Ivy had lived here, I always felt an indescribable disgust in my heart. The buyer was a merchant from out of town. He planned to settle locally and bring his whole family over. The double school district of this house satisfied him greatly, plus the villa has 3 floors in total, with a basement and large space. He paid the deposit on the spot and asked the agent to prepare the transfer procedures. Before the house transaction, I stepped into the villa once again, bringing the housekeeping staff I hired. Ethan was shocked to see me bringing 6 people in housekeeping uniforms into the villa. "Claire, what are you bringing so many people here for?" "I just hired cleaners last week, no need to clean now." I didn't even give him a glance. With a wave of my hand, I said to the staff behind me, "In this villa, except for the soft furnishings, clear out all other personal items and throw them to the main gate." Then I pointed to 2 of the housekeepers, "You 2 come with me, help me organize my personal items." Ivy stared at me fiercely, her gaze as if she wanted to devour me. The confusion on Ethan's face deepened. "What are you doing? Why clear out all the items?" I said leisurely, "Because I sold the house." Ethan was stunned. Why suddenly sell the house for no reason? Ivy screamed in shock. "This is Ethan's house, what right do you have to sell his property?" I said calmly, "Now this house is mine, whether to sell or not is my freedom." Ethan grabbed my wrist and pulled me aside, his grip too strong. I couldn't help but cry out in pain. He lowered his voice. "You sold the house, where will we live after we remarry?" "When did I agree to remarry you?" A smile curved at the corner of my mouth. Ethan completely froze in place. I shook off his hand. Continued to direct the housekeepers to move all my items to the truck outside. Ethan seemed to finally react. He blocked me angrily. "Claire, we're just temporarily divorced." I scoffed lightly. "May I ask if the law has the words temporary divorce?" "Divorce is divorce." Ethan was stunned, then his face gradually cooled down. He gritted his teeth. "You actually set a trap for me?" I also withdrew my smile. "All of this was proposed by you voluntarily, how can it be considered me setting a trap for you?" Ethan stared at me fiercely, his eyes bloodshot making him look ferocious. My expression was ice cold. "Ethan, from now on, you are you, I am me, we have no more entanglements." He seemed not to expect me to be so resolute. His mouth opened. In the end, he didn't say a word. 2 months later, the shares in my hand were gradually sold off. After Ethan learned about it, he called me in a rage. "The shares were mortgaged to you by me, what right do you have to sell my company's shares?" I didn't want to argue with a fool. "The shares are under my name, I can sell if I want, that's my right." He said angrily, "Then why didn't you sell directly to me? Do you know how important those shares are to me? Others buying those equities can have control over major decisions in my company, do you understand?" His roaring voice was deafening. I dug my ear and said calmly, "Splitting and selling the shares is already the utmost benevolence to you, you completely have the ability to acquire them back from their hands." Ethan took a deep breath. "Do you really want to put me to death? I've explained to you that the divorce is just to help Ivy fulfill her last wishes, do you have to be so unreasonable? But even if you make a fuss, there should be a limit, this way both sides suffer, what benefit is there for you?" I suspected he had some serious brain issue. Where's both sides suffering? Clearly only he is hurt. I didn't want to listen to his paternalistic preaching anymore, so I hung up the phone directly. After thinking, I simply pulled his number into the blacklist. Once and for all. Time flies, several months passed again. When Ethan and I divorced, it was the depths of winter, now it's the season of osmanthus fragrance filling the garden. While scrolling Facebook, I accidentally came across an account. The profile picture was Ivy. Big data is really precise, even though I've deleted their contact information, I can still come across them. Ivy's latest video was of her and Ethan kissing under the aurora in Iceland. In the video, although she wore loose warm cotton clothes, one could still see her face full and radiant. Where was there any sign of a patient? I had to sigh at the power of love to bring people back from the dead. On the contrary, Ethan had lost a lot of weight, looking sickly and somewhat haggard. But what does that have to do with me? I clicked not interested in this author. Unexpectedly, at this time, Ethan's company had a major flaw. During the time he took Ivy to travel the world, his company's finance embezzled tens of millions of public funds. It wasn't until the bank froze the company account that he discovered the abnormality. It was said that the finance's boyfriend tricked her into embezzling public funds to secretly invest in some emerald mine, needing only 2 months to earn back principal and interest. But the other party was a scammer. After the money was transferred to the designated overseas account, contact was lost. The finance's boyfriend was scared and directly fled the country. The finance was still toughing it out at work until the matter was exposed. After Ethan discovered, he immediately reported to the police. But it was already too late. Besides sending the finance to prison, the embezzled money couldn't be recovered. Ethan went bankrupt. I felt somewhat emotional. Truly, the world is unpredictable, one thing leads to another. However, what made me emotional was not only this. Also, what Ivy suffered from was not stomach cancer at all, but severe gastric ulcer. The symptoms are indeed somewhat similar to stomach cancer. The first time was a misdiagnosis, but later confirmed as gastric ulcer. Ivy still chose to conceal it from Ethan. The reason this was discovered was because Ethan carefully took care of her for over half a year, plus hospital treatment. Her condition had completely healed. The complexion of a healthy person and a cancer patient. Even if Ethan is a fool, he could distinguish a bit. He took Ivy directly to Shanghai for re-examination. After a series of checks, besides finding Ivy had some gastric distension, there were no other issues. Ethan was ecstatic, even the sorrow of bankruptcy was diluted. He posted several Facebook posts in a row, stating that advanced stomach cancer can be cured. I looked at the screenshots of Ethan's Facebook sent by a friend, the corner of my mouth twitched. When did his brain go bad? Or was it always bad? I have no way of knowing. The turning points in things are often unexpected. Not long after Ethan's company applied for bankruptcy liquidation, he actually came to me to remarry. Claire, Ivy's condition has been cured, and I've accompanied her to complete all wishes. Now we can remarry. My head ached doubly. Isn't it because Ivy went abroad again to find her ex-husband that you come back to eat this grass of mine? Although on Facebook I clicked not interested in Ivy, I was still fortunate to come across it once more. Previously, content related to her and Ethan had been deleted or hidden. The latest one was a ticket to M Country, with the caption, "Crossing mountains and seas to see you." Naturally, she wasn't going to see Ethan. Ethan knelt down in front of me with a thud. "Forgive me." "What? If I apologize to you, will you forgive me?" "From now on, no matter what you say, I'll agree, as long as you come back." Probably drank fake alcohol again. "I come back? Then what?" "Come back and we remarry, okay?" I laughed until my stomach hurt. "Ethan, you don't think marriage is child's play, do you? Leave when you want, return when you want. What do you think you are?" Ethan's expression was pained. He grabbed my hand. "Ivy has gone abroad again, she won't be our obstacle anymore. I've deleted all her contact information." Tears welled up in his eyes. It was clear he really regretted. I forcefully pulled out my hands, my expression ice cold. Just as I wanted to point at his nose and scold him harshly, Ethan's phone rang. I glanced at the caller ID. The note was, Ivy heh. Who was it that said he deleted all her contact ways a second ago? Ethan swayed, hesitated for a long time but still slid to answer. Probably afraid I'd misunderstand, he put the phone on speaker. After the call connected, he gritted his teeth. Speak. What tricks do you want to play now? Haven't you harmed me enough? But from the other end came a weak, crying voice. Ethan, sorry, it's me who let you down. I hurt so much now. Ethan's face changed drastically. What's wrong with you? What happened? The phone on the other end seemed to be taken by someone. Hello Mr. Ethan, I'm Ivy's friend. She went out at night and was accidentally injured by gangsters in a street conflict. The bullet pierced her left abdomen. Before the words finished, Ethan was already shaking like a sieve. Then his legs went weak, and he slumped to the ground. Ethan almost crawled away from me. A week later, Ethan sent me a message. It was said that the bullet injured Ivy's uterus and ovaries. She probably won't be able to get pregnant in this lifetime. After Ivy's ex-husband abroad knew, he proposed breaking up with her again. A month later, Ethan brought the weak Ivy back to the country. He didn't come to me again to talk about remarriage. Soon, a friend from university sent me an invitation, full of questions. Claire, did you and Ethan divorce? How could he suddenly invite me to his wedding, and it's with Ivy? I opened the invitation and zoomed in to look. I recognized the handwriting above, all handwritten by Ethan. I remember when he and I got married, all the invitations were written by me. Love or not is so obvious. I went back to the dialogue box and replied, yes, he and I divorced more than 2 years ago. The classmate didn't speak again. Probably didn't know what else to say. I used the funds in hand to open a homestay near the scenic area in the neighboring city, where the government is vigorously developing tourism. My homestay covers over 100 mu, with cafes, dessert shops, parent-child stations, swimming pools, etc. The customer flow is quite good. Because the design and operation are quite distinctive, it gradually became a net red check in place locally. Due to being busy with work, I've forgotten most of those past events. Meeting Ivy and Ethan again was already 2 years later. Another Qingming festival, I went back to sweep the tombs. Early in the morning, misty rain. What I never expected was to meet Ethan at the cemetery. I frowned but didn't flare up. Those messy things between him and me, I didn't want to make a scene in front of the elders. On the way down the mountain to the parking lot, Ethan spoke from behind me. In the end, it was my fault. I let you down, let down our marriage. I didn't want to hear these words. Besides, they are old sesame and rotten millet matters. What's the point of bringing them up again? It's already past. I'm living well now, better than when I was married to you. Ethan was silent for a moment, then spoke. Ivy and I divorced less than a year after marriage. It was my mom who disagreed. She couldn't accept that Ivy couldn't have children. My steps paused. Inevitably a bit of sorrow floated in my heart. This man, still as selfish as ever. So you stood on the same front as your mom and divorced Ivy? My words were full of contempt. Ethan's face was ugly. The divorce was proposed by Ivy. Her personality couldn't stand my mom's sarcasm. Her personality is not like yours. My mom doesn't like her. Ethan, I quite look down on you. If you could stick to your original intention and protect Ivy behind you, I might look up to you a bit, but you really make me feel disgusted. Whenever I think that I shared a bed with you for 5 years, I can't help but want to vomit. Ethan quibbled. It was she who betrayed me first. In university she broke up with me without hesitation to go abroad. After her condition recovered, she also returned abroad at the first time. To her, I was just a spare tire. I laughed mockingly. So you two are the real pair. Breaking up is really regrettable. Perhaps my sarcasm and disgust were too obvious. Ethan was embarrassed and froze in place as if pricked by a needle. He said, I didn't know things would develop like this. Initially she said advanced cancer. I just wanted to help her fulfill wishes. I never thought of really divorcing you. I continued walking forward. How could you not know things would develop to this point? You just didn't expect yourself to fall into such a destitute state, right? Ethan bent down in pain, the whole person like having his spirit drained. He murmured, but I never thought you would really leave me. I looked up at the sky, sighed deeply. Recalling our vows at the wedding, to accompany each other for life, regardless of birth, old age, sickness, death, regardless of poverty or wealth. But later, who was the first to let go of the tightly held hands? After that time, I never saw Ethan again. But I heard about him twice. Once at Ivy's wedding scene, he went and caused a huge uproar. This was filmed and posted online. It really seems like karma, no one ends well. Later, he joined a new company. During negotiations with a client, due to disagreement, he smashed the client's head with a wine bottle. Someone who once stood in a high position, how could he willingly bow and scrape? But all unrelated to me. The torrent of time pushes us forward. The wheels roll on, crushing past memories. We head to different seas of people, from now on no more intersections.